Tell me about a time you had conflict with another team. Introduction. This is a common behavioral interview question for software developers, backend developers, full-stack developers, senior developers, and team leads. Interviewers ask this question to understand whether you can handle cross-team conflict professionally, whether you avoid blame and focus on facts, how you communicate with teams outside your own, how you handle dependencies and ownership gaps, whether you can resolve blockers without escalation drama, how you protect delivery while maintaining relationships, whether you can align teams around a shared goal. This question is especially important for Java developers, backend developers, Spring Boot developers, full-stack developers, senior software developers, team leads, microservices teams, Agile teams. The best way to answer this question is by using the STAR method. STAR means S, situation, explain the background. T, task, explain your responsibility. A, action, explain what you personally did. R, result, explain the final outcome. A good interview answer usually spends 10% situation, 10% task, 60% action, 20% result. The most important part is the action section, because interviewers want to understand how you handled the conflict professionally, clarified facts, aligned with the other team, and helped reach a solution. Question: tell me about a time you had conflict with another team. Example 1. Conflict with downstream API team about contract change situation. In one project, our Spring Boot service depended on an API owned by another internal team. During QA testing, our integration started failing because the downstream team changed one response field name in their QA environment. The change was not communicated earlier, and QA testing for our team became blocked. Task: I needed to handle the conflict professionally, clarify the API contract, and unblock our testing. Action: I first avoided blaming the other team. Instead, I gathered facts. I compared. Check. Agreed API contract. Check. Actual QA response. Expected field name. Changed field name. API version. Deployment timing. Impacted test cases. Error logs. Then, I contacted the downstream team and explained the issue clearly. I said that our integration was built based on the earlier contract, but the current QA response was different. I asked whether the field change was intentional or accidental. The downstream team confirmed that the change was intentional, but had not been communicated early. To move forward, I suggested a short alignment call with both teams. In the call, we agreed on K, final response field name, K, backward compatibility expectation, K, API versioning rule, communication process for future contract changes, K, QA retesting plan, K, ownership of documentation update. To reduce immediate impact, I updated our client mapping to support the new field, while keeping compatibility where possible. I also updated our integration test and API notes. Result: QA testing resumed the same day. Both teams aligned on the final API contract. We also agreed that future contract changes should be documented and communicated before deployment to shared environments. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows cross-team communication, no blame mindset, API contract awareness, conflict resolution, integration ownership, process improvement. Example 2. Conflict with DevOps team about deployment configuration situation. In one release, our feature depended on a new environment variable for an external service URL. The code had passed QA, but during deployment preparation, the production configuration was not ready. Our team expected DevOps to configure it, while DevOps expected the development team to provide exact details earlier. Task: I needed to resolve the conflict and make sure the release could proceed safely. Action: I first reviewed the release notes and deployment checklist. I confirmed what information was missing. The missing details included environment variable name, external service URL, target environments, required secret or config value, smoke test steps, rollback notes, owner confirmation. Instead of arguing about who was responsible, I focused on what was needed to move forward. I created a small configuration summary and shared it with DevOps. The summary included: check config key, check expected value per environment, check service dependency, check how to verify after deployment, check smoke test endpoint, check contact person for issues. Then I scheduled a quick discussion with DevOps, QA, and the release manager. We agreed that development would provide configuration details earlier, and DevOps would confirm readiness before deployment. I also updated the team's deployment checklist to include configuration ownership. Result: the missing configuration was added before production deployment. The release went smoothly. The updated checklist reduced confusion in future releases. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows: check DevOps collaboration, ownership clarity, release readiness, practical conflict resolution, documentation, prevention of repeat issues. Example 3. Conflict with QA team about defect severity situation. In one sprint, QA raised a defect has high severity because an API returned a validation error message that was not user-friendly. From the development side, the API behavior was technically correct, so there was disagreement about whether it should block the release. Task: I needed to work with QA and the product owner to decide the right severity and action. Action: I first reviewed the defect carefully. I checked actual API response, expected response, user impact, affected role, whether the issue blocked a core flow, whether there was a workaround, whether the message exposed technical details. Then I spoke with QA respectfully. I acknowledged that even if the API was technically working, confusing error messages could still affect users and support teams. I suggested involving the product owner to confirm business impact. In the discussion, we agreed that the defect should be fixed before release because the message could confuse users during a common validation scenario. I updated the API response to return a clearer, user-friendly validation message. I also added a test for that error scenario. Result: the conflict was resolved without blaming QA or development. The API was improved before release. QA and development also became more aligned on how to evaluate defect severity based on user impact, not only technical correctness. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows: respect for QA, user impact thinking, defect severity judgment, product owner alignment, quality improvement, mature conflict handling. Example 4. Conflict with front-end team about API response format situation. In one full-stack project, the front-end team requested a flattened API response because it was easier to display in the UI. The backend team preferred a nested response because it matched the domain model more closely. The disagreement slowed down integration. Task: I needed to help both teams agree on an API response format that supported the UI while keeping the backend maintainable. Action: I first listened to both sides. The front-end team wanted simpler UI mapping, fewer nested checks, easier table display, faster integration. The backend team wanted domain consistency, reusable DTO structure, cleaner service mapping, less duplicated response logic. I suggested looking at the API from the consumer's perspective. Since the API existed to support the UI, the response should be convenient for that use case, but not expose database entities directly. I proposed a compromise. Use a response DTO designed for the screen. Keep internal domain models separate. Flatten only fields needed by the UI. Avoid exposing unnecessary backend structure. Document the response clearly. Add sample JSON for frontend and QA. I created a sample response and reviewed it with both teams. Result: both teams agreed on the screen-specific DTO. Front-end integration became easier. Back-end maintainability was protected because internal domain objects were not exposed directly. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows accomplishment. Front-end, back-end collaboration. API design maturity. Consumer-focused thinking. Compromise. DTO design. Team alignment. Example 5. Conflict with another team about ownership of a production issue situation. In one production incident, users were experiencing intermittent failures in a flow that involved our service and another team's downstream service. Initially, both teams were unsure where the issue originated. There was tension because each team thought the problem might be caused by the other service. Task. I needed to help investigate the issue objectively and avoid a blame-based discussion. Action. I focused on facts and traces instead of assumptions. I collected correlation IDs, request timestamps, our service logs, downstream service response codes, timeout patterns, affected user count, recent deployments from both teams, retry behavior. I created a timeline of one failed request. The timeline showed: check, request entered our service. Check, our service called downstream API. Downstream response was delayed. Check, our timeout was reached. I shared the timeline with both teams. This made the issue clearer. The downstream service was slower than expected during peak traffic, but our timeout and error handling also needed improvement. We agreed on shared actions. Check, downstream team would investigate latency. Our team would improve timeout handling. Our team would return a clearer error response. Both teams would add monitoring around the integration. Support would receive a clear status update. Result. The incident was resolved collaboratively. The downstream team improved their service response time. Our team improved resilience and error handling. The conflict became a joint problem-solving effort instead of a blame discussion. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows production incident maturity, no blame investigation, cross-team troubleshooting, timeline analysis, shared ownership, resilience improvement. Example 6. Conflict with security team about logging situation. In one project, we added more detailed logs to help troubleshoot production issues. The security team raised concerns that some logs might expose sensitive information. The development team felt the logs were needed for support, but security was concerned about data exposure. Task. I needed to help balance troubleshooting needs with security requirements. Action. I reviewed the log statements with the security team. We identified which fields were useful for debugging and which fields could create risk. Sensitive fields included: personal identifiers, account details, full request payloads, tokens, authentication headers, internal exception details. Useful safe fields included: correlation ID, endpoint name, status code, error category, processing step, safe business reference, timestamp. I proposed updating the logging approach. The new approach included removing sensitive fields, masking partial identifiers where needed, logging correlation IDs, using error categories, avoiding full payload logging, documenting safe logging rules, adding code review attention for logs. I also updated the troubleshooting guide to show how support could investigate issues using correlation IDs. Result. The security team approved the logging changes. Developers still had enough information for troubleshooting. The team improved its safe logging process for future development. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows security collaboration, practical compromise, safe logging, production support awareness, risk reduction, cross-team respect. Example 7. Conflict with product team about scope change situation. In one sprint, the product team requested additional functionality for a report feature after development had already started. The request was valuable, but it affected backend calculation logic, front-end display, QA test data, and regression testing. The development team was concerned that adding it immediately would risk the sprint goal. Task. I needed to help resolve the conflict between business urgency and delivery risk. Action. I first acknowledged the value of the product team's request. Then I explained the technical impact clearly. The added scope affected calculation rules, date filtering, time zone handling, database query, API response, front-end UI, QA test data, regression testing. I suggested splitting the request. The options were current, add everything now and accept deadline risk. Finish the original scope and create a follow-up story. Include the highest value part now and move the rest later. I recommended the third option because it gave the product team some value without risking the entire sprint. I helped update the acceptance criteria and created a follow-up story for the remaining work. Result: the product team agreed to split the scope. The team delivered the original feature and the highest value part of the new request. The remaining work was planned properly for the next sprint. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows cut business empathy, cut scope management, technical impact explanation, cut negotiation, cut agile planning, cut delivery protection. Example 8. Conflict with data team about data quality situation. In one release, our application needed data from a shared source managed by the data team. During testing, we found missing fields, duplicate records, and unclear status values. The data team felt the application should handle those records, while our team felt the source data should be corrected before release. Task: I needed to help both teams agree on a safe way to handle the data issue. Action: I first created a clear report of the data problems. The report included total records reviewed, records with missing fields, duplicate records, invalid status values, unclear mapping cases, records needing manual review, examples of affected records. Then I explained the application impact. If we accepted the data as is, it could cause correct UI display, correct failed validation, correct wrong report totals, correct support tickets, correct inconsistent business behavior. I suggested a shared solution. The data team would correct known bad records, and our application would add validation and error reporting for future unexpected records. The plan included check data cleanup before release, confirmed status mapping rules, application side validation, skipped record report, QA validation, business sign-off. Result: both teams agreed on the shared plan. The data quality issues were fixed before production. The application became safer because future invalid records would be reported instead of silently processed. Why this answer works? This answer is good because it shows key data quality awareness, cross-team negotiation, shared responsibility, business impact explanation, validation process, safe release planning. Best short answer version. If you need a short interview answer, you can say, in one project, our Spring Boot service depended on an API owned by another internal team. During QA testing, our integration started failing because the downstream team changed one response field name in their QA environment without communicating it earlier. Instead of blaming the other team, I compared the agreed API contract with the actual response and confirmed the mismatch. I contacted the downstream team and asked whether the change was intentional. Once they confirmed it was intentional, I suggested a short alignment call. In the call, both teams agreed on the final field name, backward compatibility expectations, API versioning rules, documentation ownership, and QA retesting plan. To reduce immediate impact, I updated our client mapping to support the new field while keeping compatibility where possible. As a result, QA testing resumed the same day. Both teams aligned on the final API contract, and we agreed on a better communication process for future contract changes. Common mistakes to avoid. 1. Blaming the other team. Bad answer. The other team caused the problem because they did not communicate. Better answer. I focused on the facts, clarified the mismatch, and helped both teams align on the solution. 2. Escalating too early. Bad answer. I immediately escalated to management. Better answer. I first tried to resolve it directly by gathering facts and setting up a quick alignment discussion. 3. Ignoring the other team's constraints. Bad answer. They needed to fix it because it was their API. Better answer. I listened to their reason for the change and looked for a solution that worked for both teams. 4. Only protecting your own team. Bad answer. I proved that our team was correct. Better answer. I focused on the shared goal, unblocking QA and delivering the feature safely. 5. No process improvement. Bad answer. We fixed it and moved on. Better answer. We agreed on a clearer contract change communication process to avoid the same issue later. Best practices for answering this question. Use the STAR method. Choose a professional cross-team conflict. Avoid blame. Focus on facts and shared goals. Listen to the other team's perspective. Clarify ownership and expectations. Propose practical options. Communicate impact clearly. Show how the conflict was resolved. End with process improvement. What interviewers are looking for. Interviewers want to see whether you can handle conflict maturely, collaborate across teams, communicate without blame, resolve dependencies, manage technical and business impact, protect delivery, maintain relationships, create better processes after conflict. For senior roles, they also want to see cross-team influence, ownership of outcomes, production support maturity, stakeholder communication, risk management, negotiation skills, ability to drive alignment without authority. Strong words to use in your answer. You can use words like clarified, aligned, coordinated, investigated, focused on facts, avoided blame, resolved dependency, created shared plan, communicated impact, documented agreement, improved process, protected delivery. Example. I handled the conflict by focusing on facts, comparing the agreed contract with the actual behavior, setting up a short alignment discussion, agreeing on ownership, and creating a shared plan to unblock QA. Good cross-team conflict topics you can use. Depending on your experience, you can talk about downstream API contract change, DevOps deployment configuration issue, QA defect severity disagreement, frontend backend response format conflict, production issue ownership conflict, security team logging concern, data team scope change, external dependency delay, environment readiness disagreement. Check. API versioning conflict, shared database ownership issue. Check. Monitoring alert ownership. Check. Release timing disagreement. Check. Support escalation process issue. Final summary. Tell me about a time you had conflict with another team is an important interview question because modern software delivery depends on multiple teams working together. The best answer should include clerk, what the conflict was, which teams were involved, why the conflict happened, how you avoided blame, what facts you gathered, how you communicated, what solution was agreed, what result improved, what process changed afterward. Good examples include Click, downstream API contract conflict, DevOps configuration conflict, QA severity disagreement, front-end back-end API format conflict, production issue ownership conflict, security logging concern, product scope change, data quality issue. The strongest answers show professionalism, ownership, communication, technical clarity, empathy for other teams, and shared problem solving.